Hey everyone, welcome to Next Up Live. I'm your host, Ben Hallbrooks from NXTsoft. And if you haven't watched one of these before, this is our really fun kind of live show that we get to do where we take a kind of a look behind the curtain at what's happening at NXTsoft in the industries of fintech and cybersecurity. And I get to interview the fine people of NXTsoft. So with me this morning, I have Shelba Murphy. Shelba is the SVP of Sales at NXTsoft. Shelba, thank you for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to this. We talk fintech today. I know you've been in this industry since, I think you say, as long as you can remember. So I know you have a lot of expertise to share.
That's true. I think I've been in this industry since before they had child labor laws in place, but I don't want to date myself.
There we go. There we go. We'll leave it at that. I love it. So this morning I wanted to jump into, I've called this fintech on the fast track, and we find ourselves really with all its hardship. The COVID-19 crisis has accelerated digital transformation like never before. We've never seen this kind of pace. So with all that happening, how are fintech companies taking advantage of that forward momentum?
That's an interesting question. And I think that's been at the top of everybody's minds as of late and over the last year, probably the last 12 months now. So, historically, banks and fintechs or financial institutions in general have had basically a love-hate relationship because fintechs were at one point thought that they might even shut down traditional banks and they would just take over the banking industry. Well, obviously that hasn't happened. But now the two realize that they really need to work together to be able to survive. And so we're seeing much of a paradigm shift because we did see that digital acceleration last year. And, prior to that, banks would talk about digital, they would talk about the importance of having it, but they really didn't act on it as much as they said they did. It was more of an as we need to basis, and it really didn't matter, if they were better than the competition. Well, now all of a sudden, when your only interaction with your client base is via your digital channels, whether it be mobile banking or some of the other solutions that are in play, it's become mission critical. So banks have the data, they have the customer, but fintechs need to be able to provide those services to those financial institutions. So it's been an interesting shift. And I think we're going to continue to see more and more fintech players come up as we continue down this journey and move progressively towards more of a digital and virtual type of relationship with our bankers.
Sure, absolutely. And maybe this is a bad analogy, it just popped into my head, but I kind of think of it like the Avengers. It's like individually they're powerful, but once they kind of to learn to work together in a way, they bind together and boom, they're way better as a team. So maybe we'll see a lot more of that going forward. But with all that happening, what are some of the challenges really that fintech vendors are facing right now?
Fintechs, I can tell you what. So Venmo, let's take Venmo as an example. They have 60% of consumers across the US that use that solution. And that's great, but they're still not really replacing a traditional bank. So what are banks doing to partner with companies and those fintech providers? Fintechs have to be able to offer a solution. They also have to be able to exchange data. So it's nice that you have a product out there and you build an application, but how do you integrate that into the ecosystem of a traditional financial institution? If you need to have access to their data, it needs to be bidirectional, it needs to be real time. It's no longer okay to have something that's a batch transaction where you have a transaction that's performed and I get notified tomorrow as a consumer, or it gets processed tomorrow or 24 hours later. No, we want it right now. And so speed to market is critical, and being able to show that your solution brings value to the table as a fintech provider.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see it be frustrating for fintechs that are really eager to get to market to all of a sudden run into the roadblock of wait, without the proper connectivity, this is really going nowhere. We have to go back, back to the drawing board. We need to get our developers on creating these API connections and all that. So if connectivity is so essential, like not obviously personally, I think we've all discovered it's so essential, in this time, and professionally, obviously it's essential as well. So on that latter one, how do we bridge that gap, the gap that you were just outlining? How do we define new ways to work together to best serve our customers?
Yeah, but before I even answer that, I just wanted to point out too, with even employees working at home, right? You have to have access to be able to sign things digitally. You have to be able to do your underwriting for your lending in a virtual environment. So it's no longer you have people in the back office scurrying around to make sure all the boxes are checked and the I's are dotted. Now we're seeing, workflow that plays into that. But again, all of that has to go back to a hosted system inside of a financial institution so that you can ensure that all that information is, number one, accurate, and that you're not missing anything, that you don't have to have the human capital to be the person in the middle to make sure that that information is exchanged properly and efficiently and securely. So that, to your point, is where we come into play. I mean, we've been around on the connectivity back into core systems and core providers for 26 years now. So we have a lot of expertise in making sure that that data is secure when it's exchanged, and that it's accurate, and that it's a bidirectional flow and interchange of information. So we basically take the ecosystem for that fintech provider and allow them to plug into that traditional financial institutions business and be part of that provider journey, and making sure that they're not just trying to connect on a one-off or trying to figure out how to reinvent the wheel. We allow them to get to market faster, and we make it more efficient. And we also make sure that anytime, financial institutions have to update their core applications on a regular basis, or any type of system of record. So they provide enhancements. Some of it might be regulatory, some of it might be feature functionality that's being enhanced. But the fintech providers have to make sure that that connectivity is not broken anytime those enhancements occur. The same thing on their end. I mean, they're constantly going to market with new solutions and making sure their product is improved and making sure it's best of breed, and what being the best provider that they can be compared to whatever competitor they're competing against. So we're able to take all of that messiness out of it and basically make sure that that data is pure, and that we're keeping up with the technology changes on both sides, so that both partners can focus, the fintech company and then the financial institution can focus on what they do best, which is enhancing their product and then serving their customers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so it's a win-win really all the way around, because that's very resource intensive, everything you're just describing. And if they can kind of offload the dirty work of that connectivity, so that, they can get back to really perfecting their solution, and working on it, the thing they're really passionate about putting their resources to, instead of this other stuff. That's really where they want to be. So that's great.
Precisely. And let's just face it, when you're hiring developers, they're not exactly the least expensive people in human capital to employ. I mean, if you're going to find somebody who's really good at their craft, go let them do what they do and build you a better widget as a fintech organization, and be innovative and be strategic about what you're doing to enhance your product and your offering. And the connectivity piece can be done by somebody who does that day in and day out, and we'll do it at a price point that's much less expensive, but at the same time make the fintech provider more successful and have a faster entry to market.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, Shelba. That's really helpful in kind of outlining the landscape and where we are today and how we can best move forward in that. So, kind of in closing, though, I wanted to give you the floor and say, look, if you could leave our audience one question about what we've discussed, what would it be?
I would just ask the fintech providers, what are you doing to get to market? What is your strategy? And what are you doing for customer acquisition? And what is it that you're going to do to allow yourself to be successful in the long run and not just for the short term?
I think that's
It has
great.
to be well defined.
I think that's great. And, if you're watching, leave us a comment, give us that answer below. If you have any other questions for Shelba, then absolutely leave those. We'd love to get back with you. And again, Shelba, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you,
And
Ben.
yeah, absolutely. And thanks for anyone watching. We do this every single week on Wednesday, 11 Central. So tune in, and thanks again. We'll see you.